Hello YouTube, Captain Mac here, and as promised, this is your basic VOR navigation tutorial. What is a VOR? It's an acronym for Very High Frequency, or VHF, Omnidirectional Radio or Range. I'm not really sure which one of those is supposed to be correct because I've seen both, but anyway, it's a VHF, which is very high frequency. It's the frequency range that these beacons send out their signal in, and I don't know what the full VHF frequency range is. If you do know what it is, do me a favor, throw it down in the comments there so that we can all learn from it. In the meantime, we just need to know that the frequency that we need to tune in on our nav radio to track a VOR is going to be listed next to it. I'm going to show you that here in just a second. Omnidirectional just means all directional. That's what omni means. It means it's all directional. If we look here, this is the Buckeye VOR west of Phoenix. This little symbol here, this is the actual VOR here, and then you can see it's got a compass rose that goes all the way around. In other words, it goes 360 degrees. Now, that being said, two things we should note right off the bat here. First of all, note that 360 or 0 degrees is over here, but north on the chart is actually here. You might be thinking, well, why is that? Because there's a difference between true north and magnetic north. Okay, it's called magnetic deviation or magnetic variation, depending on who you ask. This is 0 degrees magnetic, whereas this would be 0 degrees true. Does that make sense to everybody? So we're going to be flying based on the compass, so we want to know what 0 degrees magnetic is. Since we're going to use our compass to help us track a VOR, it gives us the magnetic north rather than the true north. And if you want to know what the magnetic variation is in the area of the chart you're looking at, these red dotted lines with these numbers next to them or numbers along them tell you your magnetic variation. We can cover that in a different tutorial. That's not the point today. Now, if you want to add some depth and realism and increase the immersion in your flight simulation, especially if you like to fly general aviation aircraft, then a great way to do that would be to pull up a chart like this on SkyVector. Just pull it up for your area. You can type in the local airport right here, hit go, and click your World VFR chart, or you could even click the terminal area chart, which is what's inside this white border, and pull up the VORs in the area. Okay, they all look the same everywhere you go. Doesn't matter what part of the chart, they all look the same. VOR, 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 and so on. Okay, and pull up this chart and then pick a couple of the VORs, 2 or 3 of them. We're going to use 3 of them. We're going to use PXR, which is right here by Phoenix. We're going to use Gila Bend, which is down by Gila Bend, shocker, Buckeye. Those are the 3 we're going to use. And rather than putting a flight plan into your FSX flight planner, just write down the frequencies for these VORs. So for us, PXR is 115.6, and you can find that right here. This is Phoenix VOR 115.6. Okay, Gila Bend's VOR is 116.6, and Buckeye's VOR is 110.6. All right, and these are the Morse code identifiers, which you can listen to through the speakers on your radio when you have these tuned in. All right, we're not going to listen to Morse code identifiers today. We're not worried about it. So rather than flying a flight plan in my my brain doesn't want to work right now. I'm trying to think about 2 things to talk about 3. I do that a lot, don't I? Rather than filing a flight plan in FSX and flying that, I'm simply going to fly to these VORs by myself. Simple as that. Okay. Now, on a normal chart, one thing I kind of dislike about SkyVector, and I'm hoping one day they'll make a change to this, if I could draw a line on here, it would be very helpful. Because what I'd like to do is I'd like to take off from Phoenix. Regardless of which direction I take off, I want to turn to a heading generally from here to here, right? Which is going to be probably around 220, 230 degrees. And I know that just from experience, but the point is I want to be able to turn to that heading and intercept a radial on this VOR. That's the whole point of this tutorial today, because you're probably saying, well, what are you talking about? That's what we're here to do today. So I want to intercept a radial on this VOR. Probably I'm going to intercept the 010 radial. And then I want to use that to fly into Gila Bend, and then from there we'll do some more navigation. Okay, so basically, let's understand VORs really quick. And then I'm going to wrap up this portion and we're going to go fly it because it's already 5 minutes and we don't want it to be too long. We know it's omnidirectional. It sends out a radio signal that goes all the way around. Radio signal is subject to line of sight, right? So think about it for a minute. If I'm flying out of Phoenix and I'm at 3,000 feet here, well, this mountain right here is 4,512 feet. If I keep flying, or if I'm trying to fly towards this VOR, A, I'm going to have a really bad day because I'm going to run into the mountain and smash my face on it. That's probably not a good idea. But B, I'm not going to be picking up the radio signal from that VOR. Why? Because it's hitting a mountain. It can't get to my aircraft. All right, so I have to keep that in mind. Same thing could be said as far as distance is concerned. If I'm 100 miles from this VOR and I'm flying at 8,000 feet, well, guess what? My visual line of sight range at 8,000 feet is only about 30 miles, I think it is, 35 miles at 8,000 feet. To get 100 miles of visual range before the curvature of the Earth takes over, you have to be at, like, I think it's 18,000 feet, 19,000 feet. And I'm just guessing on these numbers. If you know the right numbers, hey, feel free to throw it out there. The point I'm making is, if you want to be able to pick up that radio signal from 100 miles out, you're going to have to be high enough to pick it up. Now, we're not going to have to worry about that today because we're just flying Phoenix, Gila Bend, Buckeye. We probably won't even fly all of them. So it is limited to line of sight, all right? It's also can be a little confusing when we talk about the radials, okay? This is the 030 radial to the VOR. So from here to the center of the VOR is what? It's not 030 degrees. It's the opposite. Okay? It's 210 degrees. And you're saying, what are you talking about? From the VOR out, this is 030 degrees, right? So if I tune 030 degrees and I fly this way, what's going to happen when I turn towards the VOR? It's going to show the little away flag, and I'm going to explain what that is in a minute, because I'm actually flying the away the away track here. I can do that, all right? Or I could tune it to the reciprocal or the back course of 210 degrees. So if air traffic control tells me to intercept the 030 radial of the Gila Bend VOR, intercepting the 030 radial doesn't necessarily mean I'm flying 030 degrees. It means that I'm intercepting this line that runs from the center of the VOR out at 030 degrees, and vice versa, 210 on the other side. If I were told to intercept the 210 degree radial, that's this side, not this side. This is 030, this is 210. Something to keep in mind. That's going to become more critical when we start to get into our more advanced navigation. For the purposes, I just wanted you to understand that, so when I talk about radials, you know where I'm coming from. Today what we're going to do is we're going to fly out of Phoenix here. I'm debating if I'll fly out of Goodyear, or I'll probably fly out of Sky Harbor here. So we're going to leave Phoenix, and I want to intercept the 030 radial for the Gila Bend VOR, and I want to track that radial inbound to Gila Bend. Okay, and then depending on how much time that takes, we may go ahead and change. I'm going to change to Buckeye VOR, but we may not track the whole thing. The idea today, most of this was meant to familiarize you with what a VOR is and the basics of how the VOR works. The rest of this tutorial, we're going to be in the aircraft, which is what we all enjoy most. And it's to show you basic VOR navigation. What is basic VOR navigation? It is me going from one VOR to the next. Now I'm going to probably fly a little Cessna in this one. I haven't decided yet, but I'm going to fly a small and slow aircraft because we don't have a lot of space to cover. All right, and I'm covering short distances here, but I can cover long distances with VORs. As long as there's a VOR available that I can track, guess what? I'm going to be able to navigate VOR to VOR. So if I went from Phoenix to Gila Bend to Buckeye and back to Phoenix, I can use just the radios to do that. I don't need to see anything. All I need to know is what my altitude needs to be so that I clear all the mountains, and I can navigate to each one of those without being able to see the ground. That's your step one navigation, instrument navigation right there. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're at about 10 minutes here. I think that's probably long enough for me talking about the VORs themselves. Keep in mind, if you have any questions about these, or if there's something you don't understand, something that I haven't explained yet, please feel free to throw it down in the comments. I'll be more than happy to get to that. Also keep in mind that we are going to do some more advanced navigation stuff later on. So let's go ahead and hop on over in the aircraft. We'll have her all fired up and ready to go, and I'll show you how to tune in and track your first VOR. Okay, here we are on board. I chose a Beech Baron 58 for this flight. It's fast enough that it shouldn't take us too long to do it, but slow enough that we're not going to be overwhelmed trying to stay caught up with everything. I can use the autopilot on this easy enough. It's not hard to use, and we'll probably set that just so that we can focus on our VOR navigation. Okay, so what we want to do before we take off, we want to go ahead and set up everything for that first VOR, because I mean, why not? We know that's what we're going to be doing. Anytime you're going to be navigating VOR to VOR, why not go ahead and set everything up before you take off? Now, if you're in the air and you just want to switch to VOR, that's something we can cover later on. But for now, let's go ahead and set up that first VOR so that we know where we're going. We want to go to the Gila Bend VOR, which is 116.60. So let's hop down here and take a look at our radios. We're going to be using nav1. That's this guy right here. So COM1, nav1, COM2, nav2. We're not going to use the nav2 today. That's for more, I mean, we could, but we don't really need it today. It's going to be more efficient for us if we're doing some more advanced VOR to VOR navigation, but we'll cover that in a different tutorial. Today, let's just focus on one nav radio and one selector here, okay, which is going to be this one right here. So what's nice about this aircraft too, and this would be a great one for you to start your VOR navigation in, this is your heading adjust bug, okay. We're not flying the GPS today. We're going to be flying just straight VOR to VOR navigation. So if I need to adjust my heading, I can do that right here. And if I need to adjust my course for my nav1 selector to my VOR, that's this one right here. And we'll talk about that in just a second. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and tune in the Gila Bend VOR at 116.60. That's going to be this side here, okay? 116, and you know, this is default aircraft, so I just scroll this down. I'm using the scroll wheel, 116.60, and then I switch it by clicking this button in the middle here. Now that is my active nav1 frequency, okay. And we said we wanted to intercept the zero. Which radial did we say? We said with probably the 030 radial, right? So what I want to do is I want to turn this to 030 degrees, okay. But let's take a look at this now. That's 030, right? Now, the arrow pointing this way on this particular VOR tells me what? That would be 030 to the VOR. But I'm intercepting the 030 radial, right? So the back course of that is what? 210 degrees. Remember, I talked about that briefly. I want to fly 210 degrees to the VOR, but I want to intercept that 030 radial, and I do that by tuning this so that the to arrow is 210 degrees. Now, little catch with that. Not all VORs use an arrow like that. That's part of the reason I chose this aircraft, because it's much simpler. When we get into more advanced VOR navigation techniques, I'll use a different aircraft that doesn't have that arrow. It uses something else called a to from indicator. And we'll do that in a different tutorial. Just know for now that this is going to act as our to and from indicator. We want to fly 210 degrees to the VOR, but we want to intercept that 030 radial. So if this were the VOR, we're intercepting the 030 radial and turning to 210 degrees to fly into it. Now let's think about this for just a second here. If I want to fly, we're looking at runway 8 here. Right, so runway 8 goes this way. We're using our compass here. Use your compass to orientate yourself. Okay, runway 8 goes this way. Here's 80 degrees right here, so it goes this way, give or take a little bit. Okay, so when we take off, we're going to be going this way, which means our VOR is going to be back over here and down this way. Does that make sense? Follow my mouse there. We're taking off this way. We're going to have to make a right turn and come back over here. As we're coming back, we're going to intercept that 030 radial and turn to 210 degrees to track into that VOR. Now, right now this little nav flag tells us that our nav1 radio 116.60 is not picking up the signal from that VOR. That flag will go away when we pick up that signal, and you'll see this middle bar will deflect to one side or the other. If we do things right, it should deflect to this side up here, and then as we get closer it'll move towards the middle. When it gets close to the middle, we want to start making our turn so that as it gets in the middle, this middle bar, you see these two little lines, this bar moves. When this bar gets in the middle, we want to be turned to 210 degrees and tracking at 210 degrees. Okay? If the bar moves to one side or the other, we do what's called following the bar. Okay? So you're going to follow the bar whichever direction it goes. If it deflects to the left, we'll turn left until the bar comes back to the center and then turn back to our heading. If it goes right, we'll turn right until our bar comes back to the center and then turn back to our heading. I hope that makes sense, and I'll actually try to make it a point to go off the VOR a little bit so that I can show that to you. As you get closer to the VOR, to the actual station, what's going to happen is that bar is going to start to deflect more and more because you're not necessarily headed directly at it. You might be, 1,000 feet to the right or left. Well, as you get closer, that signal gets more sensitive, that bar gets more sensitive, and it's going to deflect more. When you know you're getting close to the VOR, you don't chase the bar. Okay, if I know I'm close to the VOR, I don't want to chase the bar. Okay, so that's something we want to make sure we're not doing, and we'll try to explain that as we go along as well. So we're going to take off here, we're going to make a right turn, and we're going to turn all the way back to the west. So we're going to turn to 270 degrees. So rather than having my heading bug set for the runway heading, which I could do, I could turn it down here to the runway heading. In fact, let's do that. That's good practice anyway. So once we get lined up, I'll make sure that that heading is directly up top. You probably hear one of my kids screaming in the background. I apologize for that. Let's go ahead and pull onto the runway here. I don't think I put my parking brake on. I don't know what my child is screaming about, so I'm going to pause this for just a minute, go figure all that out, and then we'll do our VOR navigation. Okay, 2-year-old meltdown over an iPad. Good times. Alright, last thing I want to do before we pull out on the runway here is I just want to go ahead and I want to set my altitude. We're going to climb up to 5,000 feet. And that way, in fact, let's climb up to, we're flying, let's climb up to 6,000 feet. This way we know we clear those mountains that we looked at on our chart there. And we should be able to receive the VOR frequency relatively soon. We can adjust vertical speed once we're in the air, and we're going to fly heading hold. We're not going to fly nav, we're not flying a GPS here, we're going to fly heading hold, and we'll use the heading bug to adjust our turn left, right, whatever we need to do. Alright, so I think we're pretty much good on that. We do have distance measuring equipment on this aircraft. That's this guy right here. If I flip it over to nav 2, it's going to measure distance to whatever the nav 2 radio is programmed to. We're tuned in on nav 1, so we want to make sure it's clicked over there, and it'll start telling us how many nautical miles it is from us, how fast we're flying, and how many minutes it should take us to get there. We're not going to focus on that a lot today. We're going to focus instead on just good old-fashioned VOR to VOR navigation without distance measuring equipment. So, that being said, I still have children yelling in the background, but I don't want to deal with them right now. I'll let my wife take care of it. She's awesome with that. So let's go ahead and pull on out here. And I know this is probably taking a little longer than we were anticipating, but it's a good time. We should be having fun here. So let's go ahead and let's make sure our landing lights are on down here. Where are they at? Let's just do this. Let's do the shortcut key, L for lights. I like it. We'll just do a rolling takeoff here. Nothing too fancy. Throw a little trim in there, and we're ready to go. Up and away. And the engine's not real loud on this thing, so hopefully it's not drowning out my voice on the video, and at the same time hopefully I'm not screaming in your ear, because that's always obnoxious, right? Okay, getting up to about 100 knots here. We're about ready to rotate. Let's go ahead and pull back gently. This airplane likes to climb. It's a little funky the way this thing flies. It's not real good mechanics on this thing. You know, we had our heading tuned pretty close. There's the gear coming up, pretty close to runway heading there. Maybe we're off just a little bit. That's why I didn't make an adjustment. And I barely touched this yoke, and this thing goes bonkers on me. So here's what we're going to do, just to make this simple so we can focus on the VOR navigation. Let's go ahead and hit autopilot on, heading mode, and altitude hold. And it's going to climb at 700 feet per minute. And that's good. I'm fine with that. I'm good enough to bring flaps up. Those have come up now. And I'm going to go ahead and bring my RPMs back a little bit. Alright, that's good there. I like that. Okay, so we're still flying on runway heading. You can see that our nav flag still is up. It's still up, okay, which means we're still not receiving the VOR, okay? At this point, we know that we want to turn to a westerly heading. We could turn left or right. We're going to turn right because I know that's going to bring us closer to the VOR, just because I know the area. You may remember from our navigation chart that Gila Bend is southwest of Phoenix. So let's go ahead and do our crosswind first. We're currently flying at about 79 degrees. So if we go 90 degrees from that, that's going to put us where? Let's think about it for a minute. That puts us at about, oh, my brain doesn't want to work now, 160 degrees? Is that right? No, that's not right. It'd be 170 degrees. Yeah, there we go, 170. So 80 plus 90 is 170. I'm pretty awesome at that, right? Sorry. Okay, you see our nav flag is gone already. Alright, nav flag disappeared. I didn't even notice it. I was too busy trying to figure out how far I had to turn there. Nav flag has disappeared. It shows that we are 46.4 miles out. We're currently flying at 80 knots, and it'll take us 35 minutes at this rate. Now, notice that the deflection is to the right. That's because we're actually not headed towards it at this point. That's alright. We're going to be heading towards it here shortly. We're going to leave that set at 210, and we're going to go ahead and turn to a westerly heading here. Kevin, right in there. There we go. That's what we want to fly, westerly heading. So let's go ahead and let it turn. And I'm sorry, it should have been deflected to the right. My brain's not functioning. Now, one thing I did notice once we started receiving the VOR, see this little white arrow here that popped up? That's our 2 indicator. If we were flying from it, it would be on this side here. And when we cross over the VOR, you'll see that change. So that's that 2 from indicator flag that I was talking about. It does have it in this aircraft. So we can turn our bearing selector to point in the direction we want to go, and we're going to intercept the back course of that. Okay, remember, if ATC tells me to intercept and fly the 030 radial for the Gila Bend VOR, that radial is the radial coming from the VOR, and I'm flying the opposite direction. So I'm actually flying at 210 degrees to fly towards the VOR. Okay, we're going to keep climbing on up here, and there's nothing to do at the moment. Okay, all we can do, because we're using our autopilot, all we're doing is monitoring our aircraft, making sure everything's doing what it's supposed to do. We've already tuned in the VOR. We can already see that we're heading towards our VOR. Alright, we're 42.9 miles out. We know that we're headed in the right direction. You see that flag already made, or that bar already made a move there. And as it gets closer to center, what do we want to do? We want to turn towards the VOR so that that bar gets lined up in the center. So that's what we're doing right now, is we're just waiting for that bar to get close to center. Now, depending on how fast you're flying, your turn radius can get larger, right? The faster you're flying, the larger your turn radius is going to be. Most of you probably already know that. So we need to think about that. Now there's ways to calculate how fast you're going to turn, what your turn rate's going to be and stuff like that. And that would give us an indication of exactly when we need to start turning to center that bar up perfectly. I'm not going to mess with all that right now. I do know that each of these tick marks on this center bar here represent 2 degrees. Okay, so when it's about 2 degrees off course, we're going to start making our left turn to 210 degrees, and that's going to take us toward the VOR. So you can see the bar is continuing to get closer here. In a real aircraft, it doesn't jump like that. It moves smoothly towards the center. Alright, but this is FSX and this is a default aircraft, so this is about what we expect right here, okay? So what we could do at this point is, if we start to make our turn, let's say I turn right now, okay, so let's go ahead and turn to 210 degrees. Line that up with our arrow right there. And we're going to see the bar move just a little tiny bit more before we complete our turn, but then it's going to stay to the right. And the problem is that's not going to do us any good over there because we want to fly directly to the VOR. If I continue to fly 210 degrees with that bar deflected to the right, then I'm going to pass the VOR on the left side. Okay? So what I need to do, you may remember from the opening of the tutorial, I need to follow the bar, right? I need to turn towards the bar. There's those mountains we were talking about right there that go almost 5,000 feet. You can see we're at 5,500 now, so we know we're going to clear those. Alright, so my bar is deflected to the right. I don't have any wind turned on. We'll deal with wind in more advanced tutorials. So what I need to do is I need to make a right turn, and there's, depending on how far it's deflected, often depends on how far you turn, but you typically don't want to turn more than 45 degrees. Because it's not deflected that far, what I want to do is I want to turn 15 degrees to the right. So I'm at 210 right now. If I turn 15 degrees to the right, that puts me at what? 225, right? So let's turn to 225. There we go. I think that was right. Pretty close anyway. Turn to 225 degrees, and now what I'm going to do is I'm flying that angle to try and intercept the VOR. Now we'll talk about it more in some advanced tutorials, but if I had wind and the wind was coming off the right side, I may need to turn further to get that bar to move. But because I don't have any wind, that bar should start moving again here shortly. So all we're doing right now is we're watching for that bar to move. We're leveling off at 6,000 feet. I'm going to go ahead and let our speed increase some more because I don't want this tutorial to take too much longer. Excuse me, I had to clear my throat there. Let me get a little drink of water. Oh, that's better. Sorry about that. Alright, so if I had wind turned on and I was flying 15 degrees off of my course there to try and intercept this bar, and it doesn't move at all, then I may need to turn a little further. As you can see, so far the bar hasn't moved. So let's go ahead and let's turn a little bit further here. And let's see if that gets our bar to move. Now I know that I don't have any wind turned on, but I also know that this VOR is pretty close. So if I'm already to the left of the VOR, as close as I am, it's highly possible that I'll stay to the left of it unless I make a relatively dramatic turn to the right. The only reason I turned early like I did was to show you guys how that works. So we're following the bar right now. You can see that this is our little airplane here. This is the angle that we're flying at compared to the 030 radial of the Gila Bend VOR. Okay, and there you saw the bar just moved a little tiny bit, and I'm just waiting for it to move a little bit. I want it to come to the center, and because I'm not at such a sharp angle, before we were at what, about a 60-degree angle before, so I might need to start my turn a little earlier if I was trying to intercept from a 60-degree angle. But we're at a pretty shallow angle right now, so I actually want to wait until that bar is almost completely centered, and then when it is, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn back to 210 degrees. Now, while we're waiting for that bar to center, let's think ahead a little bit. We're going to go from the Gila Bend VOR to the Buckeye VOR, and the Buckeye VOR is 1110.60. So we can put that in our standby frequency in our nav1 over here, 1110.60. Let's go ahead and set that now. Come on down. Oop. There's 110.60. So once I cross over the Gila Bend VOR, I can just click this button here and that'll switch the frequencies, and then I'll show you how you find which way to go to track it. Okay? And we're just cruising along right now. This tells us we're 30 miles out in about 11 minutes. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get lined up here and I'll start tracking in, and then we'll see how long it looks like it's going to take us. And if it's going to take quite a while, I'll pause the video and then bring it back on when we're getting close. That way you guys don't have to sit here and watch a long video of me doing not much of anything except following this bar here. Boy, my throat doesn't want to clear this morning, I'll tell you what. It's one of those days. Anyway, you can see the bar is still moving. We're getting closer, but we're not actually flying directly towards it. It's off to our left a little bit. So So we're just waiting for that bar to get close to center so that we can track directly into the VOR. And we got about 10 minutes of flying time left. So once I actually start tracking into this VOR, then I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'll bring it back up when we're almost on top of the VOR. And it's great to have this distance measuring equipment. There are some aircraft that don't have it, and in some later, more advanced tutorials, we'll show you how to use timing to there's my brain not wanting to work again, thinking about 3 things, talking about 4, or thinking about 4, talking about 3. We'll show you how you can use timing with VORs, especially for a VOR approach. But that's something for a later, more advanced tutorial. We're not worried about that at the moment. Since we have our distance measuring equipment, we're going to go ahead and take advantage of that. And you can see our bar is just about centered here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make that turn to 210 degrees now. And I'm going to leave it just shy of that, just for a second, because I want that bar to line up center. And now we're good. Okay, so 210 degrees is where I want to fly. And you can see my bar is centered now. And as long as that bar stays centered with my 2 indicator, then I'm flying at 210 degrees to the Gila Bend VOR. Keep in mind, I am on the 030 radial. If this were the VOR, I'm on this side of the VOR right now, which means I am on the 030 radial. Okay, but I'm flying 210 degrees. And you can see our bar is deflected just a tiny bit to the right. Now I can adjust for that because I'm still 23 miles out, so I can go 5 or 6 degrees to the right and let that bar come back to the center a little bit, because we just turned in a little quick, that's all. Okay, so I can go over to the right a little bit. Again, I can just follow the bar. Remember, as I get closer to the VOR, that bar is going to start to deflect more dramatically, and if I chase it, I'm going to end up doing S-turns all over the air, and we don't want to do that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and fly this for a couple minutes, and I'm going to get it just to get that bar a little closer to center. I'm going to pause the video, and then I'm going to come back on when we're about 5 miles from the VOR, so that you can see what's going on there, and you can see what happens when we change from one VOR to the next. So I'll see you guys back here in just a couple minutes. Okay, we're just a shade over 5 miles from the VOR at this point, and as you can see, I'm actually tracking just a little to the right of the course I want to fly, and the bar is still not quite centered. So I didn't actually hit clear all weather. I just put calm weather or whatever. I didn't clear all the weather out. So we do have a little bit of a crosswind. And so what ended up happening is, in order to track into the VOR, I actually need to fly heading a little to the right of it, which means we have a wind coming off the right side of the aircraft, and that's alright. But you can see we're pretty close to the VOR right now. Let me see if I can show you something here. Let's see if this will work. Ah, there we go. I know that looks a little silly, but the airport is actually, let me just hop out of the airplane. This is Gila Bend Airport right here. I know it's a little weird to hop out of the top. The VOR is right here. Okay, so we're just about on top of it, and you can see this flag's going to probably move, or this bar is going to move a little bit more. What should happen is this little arrow should disappear here in a minute, and that should tell us we're basically on top of the VOR, because the signal doesn't really go straight up very well. Since we're not very high, we're still tracking the signal in pretty close. But sometimes, you know, up to 4 miles out, depending on how high you are, that signal can disappear, and that's okay. We'll know we've crossed over the VOR in this case when our distance measuring equipment gets to 0 and then starts counting back up. See, it's at 1.5 and it's slowing down. And what should happen is, as we cross over the VOR, that flag should disappear and then switch to the other direction, and then we will then be on the 210 degree radial flying out from the VOR. You see how the flag's moving now? Okay, that's because we're crossing over. And that's alright. We don't want to chase that flag right now, or we're going to end up doing S-turns. There it goes. We're over the top of the VOR right now. The flag came out because we're not receiving a signal. As soon as, now, bam, just like that. So it didn't take very long, and then you'll see our distance starts counting up. Now we're at 1 mile and so on, and the flag changed. The arrows pointed the other direction. So now we are flying away from the VOR on the 210 degree radial. Give or take a little bit. Okay, so we want to go to Buckeye VOR next. That is 110.6. So I'm going to switch the frequency. Now watch, when I switch the frequency, that bar is going to move. Okay, see, now it says it's not receiving it. Now we're receiving it. It says we're heading away from it. Here's what we want to do. How do we find our way to that VOR? I'm going to rotate this knob until the bar centers. So as I rotate it, and I want it to center with a 2 flag indication. Okay. See, it just flipped to 2. So if I go back here, see, that's away. That's 2. So that tells me that that is generally to it, but the bar is not centered, right? So I want to center that bar, and this is going to tell me what heading I need to fly to get to it. Okay. Alright. So that's about the heading I need to fly to go to the Buckeye VOR. So let's rotate our heading bug in that direction. Okay. And it's okay, the bar is going to move a little bit, that's fine. Okay. That's the heading we're going to fly to get to the Buckeye VOR. Now, since we can see the bar is starting to deflect to the right, let's go ahead and turn a little to the right of that course right away, so that as we come around, we're already headed towards the bar. Alright? So I'm going to go ahead and turn it to about 360 degrees. It looks like it's about a 340 degree, the course is about 340 degrees. Pretty close. Let's turn it, it's actually 336. Now see, we're already almost centered up on it. So let's back that off just a little bit. Okay, that's the heading we're going to go ahead and fly to the VOR. But our bar is offset to the right a little bit, so we're going to follow that bar by flying right just a little bit. And I know this video is probably getting just a little long, but this is VOR, basic VOR navigation. So when we get into some of the more advanced stuff, the videos will probably be a little bit longer. But as you can see, once we knew we had crossed over the Gila Bend VOR, we change our radio frequency to the Buckeye VOR 110.6, and then we rotate our, this is called the Omni Bearing Selector for Nav 1. We rotate it until it shows us a 2 indication, right? 2 indication. And that bar was centered, and that told us what heading we needed to fly from that point. Now the bar moved a little because we flew beyond that point a little bit, so we need to fly back to the right a little to get back on course. And eventually what you'll see is this bar will center itself back up, and we will be headed, and we'll turn to this heading, and we'll be heading directly towards the Buckeye VOR. That's how you go from one VOR to the next in your in VOR to VOR navigation. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Let's go ahead and tune our Phoenix VOR PXR, which is 115.6, and all we got to do is bring this down to 115.6, and that's our standby now. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and track into the Buckeye VOR, and then when we get close again, I'll hop back on here with you and I'll show you the transition from one VOR to the next again. And you can see our bar is just about centered up there, so we can turn a couple degrees. In fact, we can turn on course there. We'll probably overshoot it just a little bit, and that's alright. So I'm going to go ahead and track this in, and then when we get close, I'll hop back on here with you guys, and you can follow me in one more transition, and then we'll call it a day. So we'll see you back in just a minute. Okay, we're just under 5 miles from the Buckeye VOR at this point. As you can see, it's about 2 minutes out, give or take a little bit. Same thing as we did before, we're tracking into the VOR on this course right here. This tells us that we're headed toward it. You can see that the center bar there deflected to the left just a little, but we know we're close. So we don't want to chase that bar at this point. 3 miles out, chasing that bar is just going to end up making us do S-turns, because we'll chase it way over this way and then way back, and then before you know it, we'll be over the top of the thing, we'll be past it, and then we'll be confused as to where we are, and we don't want to do that. I know this video got just a little long at this point. Sometimes that's just the way things go, and I tend to talk a lot, but you know, unless we did this in a jet aircraft, it's going to take a few minutes either way. But we're going to wrap it up here shortly. I just want to show you the transition one more time, and you may remember, in fact, what I'll probably do is I'll put a little edit in the video where I'll hop on over right now. Okay, this is take 3 of this little section because for some reason my video recorder doesn't want to save the file. So I'm going to go through this relatively quick. We took off from Phoenix on runway 8, which is this runway here. We made a right turn and intercepted the 030 radial to track inbound at 210 degrees to the Gila Bend VOR. We crossed over the VOR before making our adjustments and our right turn, which puts us on this heading here generally towards Buckeye VOR. And we're right in this general area here. As soon as we get over the top of the Buckeye VOR and we get that little nav flag that pops up and tells us we're not receiving a signal from the VOR, we'll switch frequencies to 115.6, rotate our Omni Bearing Selector nav until we have a little 2 indication with the triangle pointed up and a bar centered, and then we'll turn to that heading, which is going to have us turning right about here, and that's going to end up bringing us in on this line generally towards the PXR or Phoenix VOR. So let's go ahead and hop back in the aircraft and see where we're at. And we're back over here in the aircraft, and so we're about to make that turn just like I showed you on the chart there. We'll be making that right turn here shortly. What we want to do is just make sure we cross over the VOR. The bar continues to deflect, that's okay. Remember, that flag's going to disappear there, and we're going to get the little nav flag here. That's going to tell us we're directly over the top of the VOR. At that point, we don't have to wait till we get to the other side. At that point, we can go ahead and change frequencies and then rotate our Omni bearing selector over to whatever to tell us which course we need to fly. So let's just watch for that flag to pop up. There it is. Let's go ahead and change frequencies. Wait for now. The new frequency already or the new VOR has already been picked up, so let's go ahead. It shows an away indicator right now. Let's rotate until we get a 2 indicator. There's our 2 indicator. Now keep rotating until our bar is centered. Pretty close. Okay, that's the heading we want to fly. Let's go ahead and turn to that heading. We'll turn just a little right of it to start with. We have a 2 indicator. We have a centered bar that tells us the heading we need to fly to get to that VOR. We're tuned at 115.60, which we know is our Phoenix VOR or PXR. And so we'll make this turn here, and then we'll do the same thing. We'll center up the bar, and that'll take us directly to PXR, which, as you remember from the chart, is just a little beyond the Phoenix Airport. But that would get us over to Phoenix Airport until we get within visual range there. And that is it. That is your basic VOR navigation. Not very difficult, but there is so much more we can do with these, and we're definitely going to get into some of that a little bit later on. But for now, there's your basics. So go on out there, hop on SkyVector there, pull up a chart in your local area, pull up the frequencies, and take the opportunity to fly a few VORs like that, and it'll really increase your level of immersion as far as flying in the sim is concerned, especially with general aviation aircraft. It's a lot of fun. It's a good little challenge, especially when you first start doing it. Once you get used to it, it's really easy. It's a great way to navigate around, especially if you just want to go up and fly for a few minutes. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Do me a favor, put anything down in the comments. If you have any questions or concerns, or if you think that I was incorrect about something, please feel free to let me know down in the comments. I do monitor those and respond as soon as possible. If you guys enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. I enjoy making these, and I definitely want to do some more of them. And that also means that if there's anything in particular you'd like to see, please take the opportunity to put it down there in the comments, and I will do what I can to put together a video that meets what you're looking for. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. Please subscribe to my channel, guys. The more subscribers I get, the more motivated I get to do some more of these. So I'm hoping some more people will hop on board here. But until next time, I'm Captain Mac, and as always, keep the blue side up unless you're crossing the Pacific, at which time you're on your own. You folks have a great day.